It's Kilo Alpha 8 Papa. I had my amp off, I'm sorry.
Sounds better with it on.
I would hope so.
Much better. All right, try that call sign again, sir.
This is Kilo Alpha 8 Papa, and I'm in the Isle of Palm, South Carolina.
Roger, and the name is Dan?
Correct.
All right, Dan, and what radio are you running?
A Kenwood TF 890.
All right, and what I would suggest would be just a token amount of compression, like a three, compressor on and about a 3 level.
Right now it's off. I'm going to turn it on, and you tell me if it makes much difference. You have it on now.
Okay, it's not going to make much difference, apparent difference, but it begins the fattening process for the radio. And I would now check the ALC and see what your ALC level is.
No, my ALC is good. It's within the range. I'm about 2/3, 70%, and that's where I'm operating it right now.
Roger, that's a good a good amount. And I would suggest then that you go to your EQ. And I have a preference if it's a little brighter signal, maybe a couple of clicks added to your top wherever it is at the moment.
This EQ has like a preset that has about 10 or 12, and I will go through some of these. This is one I program. This is the user 2, but I'm going to go up to a high boost here. That's high boost 1, high boost 2, formant pass, bass boost 1, bass boost 2, conventional, and back to my user 1.
I would say check your conventional and tell me about your antenna system.
Yeah, there's the conventional there. The antenna system is a 0.5 vertical antenna in my backyard, and I have a lagoon back here, and I am about 1,000 feet from the ocean, so I'm in a good location here.
Oh, roger that. Well, you're running probably about a 4 dB dynamic range. I'm usually trying to get folks to run about 3. At a 3 dB dynamic range, your average percent of peak modulation is somewhere in the 80 to 85% area, Roger.
Okay, and how would I get it down? You just maybe cut the mic gain down?
Well, no. See, it's the opposite. The fatter the signal, the lower the dynamic range. What you're talking about in dynamic range is the difference between the least amount of audio and the maximum amount of audio. So if you're running 10 dB dynamic range, that means that you have the least is -10 and the max is 0 level, say on a VU meter. So what you want to do is bring that least up. And in that, when you do that, then you're fattening the signal. The compression limiting between those two, you're looking to reduce the dynamic range for a fatter signal. Roger.
Okay, and how should I go about that?
Well, like usually you can run a token amount of compression, like a 3, and then bring your mic gain up, or manipulate your mic gain to where your ALC is running between half and 2/3. I recommend 2/3 because that represents a fatter signal. Roger, will represent a fatter signal.
Okay, I'm going to turn my output on the. It has a different kind of compressor. It has an input and an output. I've turned up the output a little, but I'll try the input too. Hold on here. Now if I turn that up, that's going to make quite a bit of difference. Back to you.
Oh, you have an output on your compressor.
That's correct. Output and an input.
Well, everybody's got an input, but nobody hardly's got an output. Turn that output. What's your reading on that output level now?
It's just about 50%. But as I increase the input, it obviously picks up background noise.
Right, but we want to stay with an ALC. So if you turn down the output of the compressor to about 15% less than where you are now, that will then you could bring the input of the compressor up, and that signal would start getting fatter.
Okay, well, I'll bring the input up there. Does that make any difference?
Okay, now you sound like you might have pulled off mic there a little bit.
I could have. I probably did.
So it's hard to gauge. You know, I'm listening. That's all I got to go by, Roger.
Well, yeah, it's tough conditions because there's QSB and polarization changes, and you go from a nice wide signal yourself to a very narrow sounding, and that's hard to avoid.
Well, I would hope that I wouldn't do too much fading. What is my signal at the moment?
You are an S9 here. You're not fading a lot, but there are times when it's just atmospheric conditions change the tonal quality.
Oh, yes. I propose that, when the signal takes off, it's all skywave, nothing's moving ground wave, and there are various reflection points in the sky that, the one part is the majority of the reflections coming down, but there are places past that point that also reflect to some degree, and when they reflect back at a later time time base, when they both come back, sometimes they're slightly at bad phase angle relationships, and the first thing that happens is that the top end of the audio spectrum starts to cancel. So that's why I always try to put a little more top end in the audio than possible, because I know that the signal is going to be degraded to some degree starting with the syllabic range.
Yes. Your signal's been holding up very well. Your audio is quite nice, which I would expect it to be. I'm running about 700 watts here, so you should have a pretty good signal. What was my signal strength?
I am running reduced RF in the front end to stay out of HEC compression. So when I'm recording, I can record as linearly, as cleanly as possible without any compression of the signal or introducing any much additional noise other than, band noise. So, but I'm looking at your signal, and I would think that maybe you could turn your compressor down just a little bit more, and then take a look at your ALC, and if it's a little bit low, you could bring your mic gain up, and we would have a little fattening going on there.
Okay, well, I can work on that, because it's when I go to certain menus, I can't see my ALC, so I'm going to have to play with that into a dummy load or something and work with that. But I'm using the monitor function. I have headphones on now, and it sounds okay to me. My processor is currently off. I could play with this a little bit, but I do appreciate you taking the time to help me. And as you said, I believe I can hear this conversation on YouTube. Is that correct?
Yes, if you go to YouTube and do a call letter search for Kilo Charlie 9, Victor Kilo Victor, that will take you to a QSO Vlog page. And on that page, you'll be looking for a QSO entitled My Group Aircheck 32219. My Group Aircheck. And I'm looking at my 22 right now on my board, and not doing real well. They're little sliders, and they have slid together. Now, yes, you can see it. 32219. Sorry about that.
Okay, that's what I'm going to do. And will that be immediately available, or will I have to wait a little while?
You'll have to wait. I'm sorry, but I usually say like a couple of days, just to be sure that it's there. I'm usually half that time, but I do say a couple of days, Roger.
Okay, well, that's what I'll do. I do appreciate you taking the time to do this, and I will let somebody else get in there, and you can help them. So this is Kilo Alpha 8 Papa. I say 7-3, and thank you very much, Jim.
Roger, Dan. And if you get a chance, I would look into a windscreen. If if you have a chance, they are just to solve so much problems with microphones. I heard a couple of plosives in there, so I'm sure that if you went by your local music store, they have real short ones now, only about 3 inches long, that don't get in the way. They do cover the front of the mic, and that's all you need. So I'll say 3s for now, Roger.
Should do that. This is just a Kenwood MC60 desk mic. It's an old mic I have. It's probably not necessarily the best, but I'll be looking for more mics. So maybe everybody tells me get a D104. 7-3, Jim, Kilo Alpha, 8 Papa.
Roger. Well, now a D104, if it's transistorized, that's great, and it'll work beautiful. But if it's a D104 without the amplifier, you're going to have sheet tin, unless you figure out a way to get a transformer that goes from a real high impedance to a low impedance to match your 600 ohm mic input. But if it's amplified, there's not a problem, because it's a perfect match. And so we say 3s for now, Dan. And you have a good day. And if you get a chance, check in next Friday, and we'll compare notes, see what's going on. 3s for now. This is KC9VKV and the Friday afternoon QSO Vlog Network. If you've got a radio, you want to check out the audio, give us a shout. This is KC9VKV.